Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where finding a roof over your head wasn't about credit scores or mortgage rates. It was about surviving a labyrinth of guild politics, whispered secrets, and city gates that didn't open for everyone. The year is 1342. The air smells like soot, roasted onions, and unwashed ambition. Through a mist of wood smoke and late autumn fog, a lone figure approaches the walls of a booming medieval city, a place bursting with promise, and ready to eat him alive. He is a stranger. Not quite peasant, not quite noble. His boots are cracked, cloak threadbare, and he carries all he owns in a leather satchel tied with piggut string. Behind him, a dozen miles of bramble-covered road and a life he's leaving behind. Ahead, stone towers, toll guards, and 10,000 tightly packed lives, each one clinging to their square foot of shelter like it's holy ground. He just wants a place to sleep. Too bad there's no such thing as a leasing office. You probably wouldn't survive this. The food might kill you. The laws would confuse you. The locals would definitely rob you, and if you're lucky, just emotionally. But this man, our stranger, presses forward into the city gates, already dreaming of warm walls and a hearth. He has no idea what he's walking into. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? Are you in a modern apartment, a cozy old house, maybe curled up in your car? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stranger's name is Toma. 28 years old. A stonemason's apprentice by trade, or at least that's what he told the man in the tavern 2 villages back. His hometown is gone, torched in a border dispute. And while the lords fought over parchment rights, his mother died of a fever, and his younger brother vanished into a conscription list. Now he's here, alone, standing beneath a city wall thick enough to stop a cannonball, not that they exist yet, trying to decide how to talk his way in. Because here's the truth, medieval cities were like exclusive clubs. Want to enter? Pay the toll. Want to live there? Better have a reason, a reference, or something to offer. You couldn't just show up and squat, at least, not legally. Toma doesn't know the rules yet. But he's about to learn them. The gatekeeper is bored. He's chewing a reed and wearing a surcoat that hasn't been cleaned since last Easter. When Toma says he's a mason, the man raises an eyebrow, then gestures toward a scrawled parchment nailed to the wall. Laborers needed, cathedral site, go to St. Grace's yard. Toma doesn't even get to plead his case. He's waved through, with a shrug and a warning, don't get caught thieving, and don't die in the gutters. We're out of carts to haul corpses. Inside, the city hums like a wasp's nest. The streets are narrow, barely wide enough for 2 men to walk shoulder to shoulder. Half-timbered houses lean precariously over the road like they're whispering secrets to each other. Gutters run with dirty water and pig bones. Overhead, laundry flaps like flags of surrender between crooked chimneys. But to Toma, it's beautiful. It's alive. It's not burning. That's good enough for now. He makes his way toward the cathedral yard, dodging carts, dogs, and an old woman selling something that may or may not be food. The sight is hard to miss, a skeleton of rising stone arches, ringing with the sound of chisels and shouted Latin. This is the medieval dream: get work, earn a place, find a roof. Here's where it gets real. The cathedral master builder, a hawk-eyed man with a crooked back, sizes him up with all the warmth of a cold forge. Mason's boy, he grunts. We'll see. If your hands don't bleed by noon, you're lying. Toma starts work that day. By nightfall, he's blistered, exhausted, and still homeless. Because even if you worked in a medieval city, it didn't mean you lived in one. So how did people find homes back then? Some were born into them. Others inherited places tucked into wards their grandfathers helped wall. Guild members sometimes got housing stipends, or rights to rent spaces tied to their trade. Foreigners? Outsiders? They had to find corners, quite literally. Toma's first night is under a cart awning behind the bakery. He wraps his cloak around himself and tries to ignore the rats. The second night, a passing cooper offers him a corner of the workshop loft, not for free, but in exchange for carrying water every morning. It's hot, it smells like pitch, but it's dry. On the fifth night, he meets Lucia. She's the baker's niece, 12, sharp-eyed, and suspicious. She catches him sneaking a crust meant for birds and doesn't scream. Instead, she says, if you're going to steal, do it from the back room. Less chance they see you. Toma laughs for the first time in days. She's joking. Mostly. Lucia is one of the forgotten residents, children who grow up in attics, storerooms, and corners of rented houses no one counts. Her family rents their bakery space from a merchant lord who's never even visited. Rent's due every new moon. Miss once? You're out. Miss twice? You're jailed. It's through Lucia he learns, real estate in the medieval city was about more than walls. It was about alliances. Who you knew. Who you owed. Who you feared. Because every building in this city had a story, and most of them came with ghosts, taxes, or someone ready to stab you for a closet. By the 10th night, Toma has a spot in a shared workshop attic with 3 other men. They hang their tools from the beams like talismans. One man snores. Another sleep-talks in Flemish. The air smells like wet wood, sweat, and something vaguely fungal. But it's a roof. And here's the wild part. He's lucky. Would you have stayed in that attic, or kept walking? Because outside those walls, people are sleeping in ditches. Inside, even a rat-infested loft is something to cling to. And what happens when that roof catches fire, or your landlord raises rent, or you offend the wrong guild brother? Well, remember Toma. He's just getting started. Walls that breathe. At sunrise, the city exhales. A golden mist slides off tiled rooftops as chimney smoke curls into the sky like threads of unspoken prayer. Market criers yawn before screaming prices. Water sellers slap their buckets into place. A rooster shouts from somewhere improbable, like the third-story window of a leatherworker's home. And underneath it all, the city moves. Not with wheels or hinges, but with a deeper, stranger rhythm, like a living creature shifting in its sleep. Streets narrow overnight. A new door appears where there wasn't one. Someone hammers a window into a wall that isn't theirs. A courtyard shrinks because a neighboring family stole a sliver of it while everyone was at mass. This is not poetic exaggeration. In medieval cities, buildings changed like weather. There were no zoning commissions. No blueprints, really. Cities didn't plan, they grew. More fungus than architecture. A cobbled-together miracle of need, greed, and superstition. Take, for example, the district known as the Steeps, where our boy Toma now finds himself delivering timber for the cathedral crew. The Steeps is a knot of alleys so narrow, two people can't pass without becoming briefly intimate. Homes here are born out of attics, sheds, old watchtowers, anything that could be patched, stacked, or claimed. A family of 5 might live above a tannery, sleeping on rush mats while the stench of processed cowhide wafts upward. It is, in short, a symphony of contradictions. On one end, noble townhouses, stone-clad, lead-glassed, freshly swept. On the other, lean-tos with walls made of scrap wood and hope. And somewhere in the middle, 1,000 shades of almost livable. So how did cities get like this? Let's back up. Imagine a town in the year 900, just a few hundred people, clustered around a river crossing, a fortress, or a monastery. A market forms. A few traveling merchants set up semi-permanent stalls. Then boom, the Crusades. Trade explodes. Populations surge. By 1200, your sleepy village is now a thriving, choking, no room left kind of town. But medieval infrastructure didn't evolve fast enough to keep up. Most medieval cities had walls, literal ones. Stone ramparts, gates, towers. They were built to protect against siege, but also to contain. Building outside the walls? Risky. You were more exposed, less protected, and often not considered a real resident. So people squeezed in. They built up when they couldn't build out. They added jettied upper stories, floors that projected outward beyond the one below, like a crooked stack of pancakes. This wasn't just about maximizing space, it also dodged certain property taxes, which were based on ground-level square footage. Yes, medieval people gamed the system, too. Fringe detail. Some buildings grew so top-heavy with extensions that upper floors nearly touched across alleyways, allowing neighbors to pass food, gossip, and probably syphilis without ever stepping outside. City plots, or burgage plots, were often long and narrow, just wide enough for a cart to pass through. Land was too precious to waste. So families shared walls. Or squatted in outbuildings. Or split homes vertically, with one family on each floor and a tavern in the basement. Debated topic? Historians argue how much planning actually occurred. Some cities had rudimentary councils. Others followed ancient Roman street grids long buried beneath the muck. But in most cases, growth was reactive, not strategic. As Toma delivers timber planks to a master thatcher, he notices something. Each house has its own lean, a kind of posture, like it's shrugging or grimacing. Some tilt forward. Others bow sideways. Few are straight. The homes reflect their makers. And their survival stories. There's the butcher who added a second floor with wood stolen from a burnt granary. The widow who turned her staircase into a ladder to hide how small her home really is. The candle maker whose home smells permanently of hot wax and desperation. Toma passes a wooden cart with 3 men arguing over who owns the alley behind it. It's barely 6 feet wide, but it's access to a bakehouse. That means value. That means rent. That means war. Because in this city, every inch counts. Would you have taken that alley, or walked away? That's the daily choice in these places: compromise, or vanish. And the walls? They aren't just walls. They breathe. Literally. Many medieval homes were made with wattle and daub, sticks and mud packed between wooden frames. The material breathes, meaning it lets moisture in and out. That's good, unless your neighbor builds too close, blocks airflow, and suddenly your house starts to rot from within. Fun, right? Add to this fire risk, thatched roofs, open flames, no fire brigade, and you start to realize, every home here is both sanctuary and death trap. Toma learns this his third week on the job when a neighboring bakery bursts into flames after a spark jumps from a chimney. The fire tears through 6 buildings in under an hour. Entire households are reduced to ash and sobs. One girl survives by leaping into a rain barrel. Afterward, men walk the street, knocking walls to test their strength. The air reeks of wet soot. The bailiff shrugs and says the houses will be rebuilt as needed. In truth, they'll just rise again. Slightly different. Slightly smaller. Slightly worse. But the city will absorb it. It always does. It shifts, like skin healing over a wound. You can't map this place. Not really. Any diagram would be obsolete by the time the ink dries. So how do you find a home in such chaos? That depends on how well you can navigate guild laws, gossip, and guilt. But we'll get to that. For now, Toma moves into a slightly sturdier attic, above a cooper's shop. It leaks less. Smells more like vinegar and sawdust. Still cramped. Still a dream. Lucia visits sometimes, mostly to steal kindling or test his moral resolve. She asks questions like, if you could live anywhere in the city, where would it be? Toma points to a stone house near the Guildhall. She snorts. You'd last 1 week with the cloth merchants. They eat boys like you with their morning cheese. She's not wrong. Because in this city, location is power. And power is rented, not earned. And the line between belonging and trespassing is a whisper on a cold morning. Remember the bakery fire? It won't be the last. The rent you never stop paying. A man knocks on Toma's door before sunrise, 3 sharp raps, then silence. It's not his attic, not his door, not his name on any lease. Still, the knocking is for him. The cooper downstairs has gotten a visit from the reeve, the city official who collects taxes, fines, and, occasionally, bribes. It seems someone has noticed a new face in the workshop's upper room. The city wants its due. Toma comes down the stairs half-dressed, still sore from lifting beams all week. The cooper doesn't look at him. Pay him, he says flatly. Or pack. The reeve is a wiry man with a wolf's smile. His boots are too clean for someone who claims to patrol alleys. He doesn't ask questions. Just names a number. It's more than Toma earns in 2 weeks. Here's the kicker, it's not rent. It's the stranger's fee, an informal toll on anyone new to the city who doesn't yet belong to a guild, church, or household. In medieval cities, belonging was everything. You couldn't just exist. You had to be tied, to someone, to something. A master, a trade, a parish. If you weren't, you were suspect. And suspects paid dearly. Toma pays. Barely. And now he knows, the walls of this city don't just keep people out. They squeeze the ones inside. Let's talk about how rent worked. Forget everything you know about leases and deposits. Medieval rent was a beast of many faces, slippery, inconsistent, and often enforced at sword point or sermon. There were three main types of housing. Owned property, rare. Usually in the hands of merchant elites, noble families, or long-standing guild masters. Homes were passed down like bloodlines. Rented rooms or floors, the most common. Often informal. Agreements were verbal. Terms changed with the moon. You could be out by sunrise with no legal recourse. Lodging in exchange for labor, the bottom tier. You worked for a roof. No cash. No rights. Just sweat and hope. Toma, like most newcomers, falls into Category 3. The cooper lets him stay in exchange for helping haul barrels and watching the fire in the kiln. It's technically illegal, but technically is a joke here. So is illegal. Most rental agreements weren't written. They were witnessed. You paid in silver pennies, chickens, labor, or all three. Miss a payment? Out. Displease the landlord? Out. Smell bad? Out. Mainstream fact, rent often took up 20 to 30% of a skilled worker's income, and more for the unskilled. But there was no regulation. A landlord could double it without warning. If you complained, they'd call the watch. Or worse, the guild. Fringe detail. Some tenants paid rent in religious services, especially if their landlord was the church. Sing in the choir, tend the graveyard, feed the priest's goat. All rent. Open debate. Some scholars argue that the poorest urban dwellers didn't really rent, they just existed in unclaimed or overlooked spaces. Cellars, stairwells, abandoned towers. But others argue these squatters paid in the coin of corruption, bribes, favors, secrets. Nothing in a medieval city was truly free. By month's end, Toma learns the value of invisibility. He fixes a broken roof beam for the cooper without being asked. He cleans his boots before entering the house. He leaves before sunrise, returns after sunset. Doesn't talk back. Doesn't make noise. Becomes part of the structure. But invisibility is a double-edged sword. Because when you're invisible, people stop defending you. One rainy evening, Toma returns to find the door barred. The cooper says nothing, just gestures toward the street. Another man, older, louder, richer, has offered better labor. Toma has 5 minutes to clear out. He ends up beneath a grain stall in the market square, curled up in his cloak like a forgotten dog. It's there that he meets Magda. She's 50-something, maybe older, maybe younger, hard to tell beneath the layers of soot and sarcasm. She sells garlic by day and rents sleeping space in her cellar by night. Calls it boarding. Really, it's just dry stone and hay. 4 farthings a week, she says. No crying. No dying. No pissing on the wall. Toma pays her with coins he was saving for boots. Again, He's lucky. Because Magda's cellar is technically part of the charnel house next door, where they store bones from overcrowded graves. She's carved out a space between the shelves of skulls and a stack of salted herring. It's dark, cold, and smells like ancient secrets. But it doesn't leak. He shares it with 3 others, a blind knife sharpener, a woman who sings to herself, and a boy who never talks but always eats. And it's there, among the bones and brine, that Toma finally understands something crucial. In this city, home isn't where your hearth is. It's where no one's trying to take it from you. Meanwhile, the city breathes on. A new tenant is hanged for theft, though no one remembers what he stole. A merchant raises rent on a whole street after his wife dreams of a demon in the well. A baker boards up her attic after rats chew through the beams, and now 5 tenants are out. The system is cruel. But it isn't broken, because it was never built to be fair. It was built to reward the connected. The landed. The inherited. Everyone else? They survive by instinct. Toma begins asking around about the stonemasons' guild. Joining would give him protection, lodging, status. But it takes time, proof of skill, and, of course, a sponsor. Lucia warns him, guilds protect you, but they also own you. She's not wrong. Once you belong to a guild, your rent might come from a guild hall dormitory, shared beds, timed meals, mandatory prayers. But that roof can vanish if you break a rule, show up late, or refuse a vote. Still, it's better than a cellar full of skulls. Would you have joined the guild, or stayed free? That's the question medieval dwellers faced daily. Belonging meant safety, but also chains. By winter, Toma is colder, thinner, and wiser. He rents a sliver of attic above a candlemaker's shop. The heat from below keeps the frost off. The wax fumes give him nosebleeds. But he's found something rarer than comfort. A key. Not to a real door, but to the city itself. Because once you learn how the city breathes, how it feeds and punishes and whispers, you stop being a stranger. You start becoming a local. And that changes everything. But remember Magda? She's about to disappear. And Toma's about to lose more than rent. Magda's disappearance and the Whisper Market. It happens on a Wednesday. The kind of day where the air hangs thick and sour, like cabbage left too long in the pot. The market buzzes, merchants shouting over each other like seagulls fighting over a fish head. Toma's on his way back from the cathedral site, his hands stiff from chiseling frostbitten stone, when he notices something odd. Magda's garlic stall is empty. Not just closed, gone. The table, the tarps, the little wooden crucifix she always kept lashed to the leg of her cart. Vanished. Like it had never been there. He sprints to the charnel house. The door creaks open, revealing nothing but the bone shelves, still standing, still watching. The cellar's stone trapdoor is unlocked. He climbs down into the damp silence. Her sleeping mat is gone. So are the others. The boy, the knife sharpener, the muttering woman, not a trace. Only the smell of mildew, and something deeper. Absence. That unmistakable scent that only lingers after someone has left without telling anyone. Toma checks with the parish clerk, the one who always sits outside counting grave fees and coughing like he's paid to do it. The clerk squints. Magda? She was evicted. Charnel House got a new overseer. Said she wasn't consecrated. Toma asks, where did she go? A shrug. Street, most likely. That's how it works. You can live in a place for 20 years, but the second a new official wants it back, you're nothing again. One flick of a quill, and you're dust. The city doesn't say goodbye. It just moves on. So how did people really find houses in medieval cities? They didn't scroll listings or hire agents. They listened. They watched. They bartered. They begged. Information lived in the cracks between rumors. There were no public directories. No for rent signs. Housing was found by whisper. That whisper might come from the laundress who heard someone was moving out after a marriage. The tavern boy who cleans the privy and overhears an argument about rent. A priest hinting that a parish widow's room is now available, read, dead. The night watchman, who'll forget to report a squatter if paid in ale or secrets. Mainstream fact, word-of-mouth networks were the lifeblood of medieval cities. Especially among the poor. Because housing wasn't just about walls, it was about safety, warmth, and above all, being left alone. Fringe detail. Some city dwellers found shelter in boats moored permanently along rivers or canals, half home, half market stall. Technically outside the city's jurisdiction. Legally questionable. Functionally brilliant. Open scholarly debate. Did medieval city councils try to regulate housing turnover? Some sources suggest attempts at rent rolls or housing registries, especially in places like London and Paris. But enforcement was spotty at best. Paper fades. People vanish. Toma finds his next room by accident. He's hauling scrap wood behind a tanner's shop when he helps a merchant's apprentice lift a crate. The apprentice, grateful and chatty, mentions that his cousin just died of the sweating sickness and left a spare room above a candlery. Toma says, "Who do I talk to?" The apprentice blinks. "Just go before someone else does." That night, Toma moves in. The room is barely wide enough for a cot. It smells like warm fat and honey. The ceiling drips wax on cold days. But there's a window. And a latch. And no skulls in the floor. It's paradise. He leaves a copper coin on the sill, an old ritual to claim space. No one touches it. For now, the room is his. Would you have taken that room, knowing someone just died in it? In medieval cities, the dead never really left. There were no deep cleanings. No health inspections. A room was available because someone stopped breathing in it, and that was a kind of blessing. Because if they died peacefully, the room might still be warm. And warm meant life. But warmth wasn't everything. Privacy mattered too. A cloth sheet hanging from a ceiling beam? That was a wall. A locked door? Luxury. Most renters shared everything, smells, sounds, fears. You could hear a neighbor's nightmares through plaster, or their prayers, or their betrayal. Toma sleeps with a knife under his mat now. Not because he expects trouble. But because trouble always expects him. Weeks pass. He starts to understand the rhythms. Every Friday, an old woman with a cracked voice walks the alleys shouting, 2 cots for linen workers. 2 cots. She's a sublessor, a rare breed, renting beds in bulk and parceling them out to single women with strong arms. Behind the Guildhall, a tailor's widow rents her son's old room to traveling scribes. One scribe writes filthy poems on the walls. She triples the rent and calls it decorative. Lucia appears now and then, mostly when bored or bleeding. She shows Toma a map she's drawn, not of streets, but of houses. Marked with symbols. A circle for safe. A slash for stay away. A cross for vacancy, maybe. He's stunned. How do you know all this? She grins. I talk to cats. He doesn't ask again. And then, one night, a knock on his door. 3 short raps. Toma opens it to find the boy from Magda's cellar, the silent one who never spoke. He speaks now. They took her to the asylum. Said she was a witch. Said she made the bones sing. Toma feels the air drain from his lungs. The boy hands him something, a scrap of parchment. Magda's handwriting, unmistakable, twisted, spidery, but sharp. Find the blue door. Knock twice. They'll know. No explanation. No name. Just that. Lucia doesn't hesitate. Let's go. They find it near the river, behind a row of fishmongers. A sagging door painted deep blue, almost black in the moonlight. Toma knocks twice. The door opens. Inside is warmth. Light. Bread. And people. A secret network, former tenants, exiled workers, runaway apprentices. They call themselves the Drift. They swap rooms. Share keys. Pass warnings. Hide the hunted. Here, rent is paid in loyalty. And Toma realizes, this is the city's true heartbeat. Not the guilds. Not the landlords. Not the taxes. But the ones who refuse to be erased. Magda's gone, but not lost. Not yet. But what they must do to get her back. That's coming. A city built on secrets and smoke. It's past midnight now, and the river fog rolls in like slow ghosts. In a city like this, you either vanish with the mist or learn to shape it. Toma stands in a candlelit corridor beneath the fishmonger row, staring at a chalk map on the wall, a living atlas of hidden beds, half-legal rentals, and whispered sanctuaries. The Drift is real. Not a myth, not a tavern tale, but a shadow network that stretches from the cathedral rafters to the brothels of the lower quay. Everyone's looking for a roof, says Lucia, but not everyone finds a door. The Drift doesn't operate by coin. Its currency is mutual need. You house someone's brother for a week, they slip you a key next month when the bailiff's on your trail. Trade a bolt of cloth for a dry room. Patch a leaking roof, and suddenly you've got a place to sleep when your landlord's arrested for heresy. Housing is not real estate here. It's survival choreography. The map pulses with shifting chalk, updated every day. Lucia runs her hand along it, eyes scanning. Here, she taps a spot near the tanners. This cellar's empty since the spice merchant ran off with his servant. And this one? She snorts. Rats. Big ones. Not metaphorical. Toma's eyes catch a marking, a red thumbprint beside a fish icon. What's that mean? Lucia's voice goes soft. Magda. That's where they took her. The asylum. The place where the city stores its unfixables. Let's pause and peel back the curtain a bit. Medieval asylums were not for healing. They were warehouses of the inconvenient. Madness could mean anything: hearing voices, speaking out of turn, owning too many cats, or knowing too much. For women, it often meant age, independence, or saying no too many times. Magda checked all the boxes. Mainstream fact: the first recorded asylums in medieval Europe appear around the 12th century, often tied to religious institutions. They were less about therapy and more about removal. Out of sight, out of mind. Fringe detail: some asylums were housed in former leper hospitals, buildings designed to isolate, not rehabilitate. In cities like London and Paris, these hybrid facilities became dumping grounds for those who challenged the social script. Open debate: did some inmates choose to go? Certain chronic poor or sick may have accepted institutional life, meager though it was, as the only consistent shelter. Others? Dragged screaming from the alleys by order of parish priests. So where did Magda end up? The asylum of Saint Bridget the Gentle. Irony? Not lost. Lucia spits when she hears the name. They say the bones under the floor rattle when someone new dies. Toma wants to storm the place. He pictures torches, ropes, righteous fury. But Lucia's been around longer. She knows better. You want to help her, she says. Then you need power. And power sleeps in warm beds. They have to go higher. The guilds. That word again. Fortress and prison all at once. If Toma becomes a guild apprentice, he gains rights, housing, sponsorship, the ability to petition. If he becomes a journeyman one day, even more. Enough to demand inquiries. Enough to get someone out of an asylum, maybe. But to do that, he must impress the Masons Guild. And that means finding the right master, one who isn't too drunk, corrupt, or superstitious to take on a dirt-smeared stonelifter with no last name. They start asking. Every inquiry costs. A favor. A secret. A lie. In a tavern shaped like a crooked boot, they meet Gerwin, a mason with hands like firewood and a temper like spoiled cheese. He tests Toma by throwing a chisel at his head. Toma catches it. You start Monday, Gerwin grunts. Just like that, he's in. The mason's quarters are on the 3rd floor of a guildhouse shaped like a flattened cube. The ceilings slope. The beds are stacked 3 high. The air is thick with sawdust and wet wool. It smells like ambition and fungus. But it's shelter. Toma gets a bunk, a locker, and a rulebook thicker than a cathedral pillar. He must pray before meals. He must wear his insignia. He must never speak to the carpenters unless spoken to. Most importantly, he cannot have outside lodgers. The guild is clear. Your bed is yours. Not for guests. Not for friends. Not for Magda. He doesn't care. Now that he's inside, he can start asking questions in official channels. He requests a work permit for St. Bridget's. says he wants to inspect the stonework. Lucia blinks when she hears that. "You're going in?" He nods. She exhales. "Then take this." She hands him a fishbone charm. Old. Smooth. Smells faintly of cloves. "Magda gave it to me once. Said it keeps the eyes from following." Toma tucks it into his boot. And on Thursday, he walks through the asylum gates. St. Brigid's is worse than the stories. Grey walls ooze with damp. Screams echo like rotting bells. A man on the roof sings about bees. A woman in the courtyard claws at invisible thread. Toma wears the mason's insignia. Pretends to measure bricks. Nods like he belongs. Inside, a nun with one good eye leads him down a hallway. "We pray for them all," she whispers. "Even the loud ones." "Especially the loud ones," Toma murmurs. He finds Magda in a cell with no lock, because locks imply value. She's sitting on the floor, humming to herself. She's thinner. Paler. But her eyes spark when she sees him. "Toma," she says, like it's normal. He kneels beside her. "I'm getting you out." She laughs. "You'll have to evict the ghosts first." "Would you have gone in? Would you have risked your apprenticeship, your bed, your standing, for someone who might not even remember your name?" Toma does. Because Magda did remember. She remembered him when he was no one. When he slept beside bones and tried not to cry. That counts. More than any contract or coin. Lucia waits by the wall that night. Magda walks free. Just barely. But the city notices. The nun reports the breach. The guild hears whispers. Toma is summoned to a tribunal, a firelit chamber beneath the guildhall. Men in wool robes ask sharp questions. He lies twice. Lucia provides alibis. Someone, maybe Gerwin, maybe not, lets the matter drop. For now. But the drift? They reward courage. Toma is given a mark, a charcoal thumbprint behind the ear. Invisible to most. To some, it means loyalty. Means he'll never sleep in the street again. For now. Because cities forget fast. And the rent? The rent never forgets. The house that eats its tenants. They say the house wasn't always hungry. Once, it belonged to a merchant who dealt in rare dyes, crimsons that looked like dried blood, blues that shimmered like beetle wings. He made a fortune, lost it in a fire, rebuilt it with bricks soaked in goat fat and promises. Then he disappeared, along with his third wife. That's the story, anyway. Now, the house is just there. Lopsided. Forgotten. Slouched between a baker and a tanner like a drunk cousin no one invites but never quite evicts. And it's available. That's the problem. In cities like this, if a house is always available, if it's too easy to get, there's a reason. The drift calls it the slag house. The guilds pretend not to know it exists. But Magda needs somewhere safe. The asylum has left cracks in her voice. She mutters in riddles. Flinches at daylight. Toma wants to help her heal. Lucia wants to blow up the guild tribunal. They compromise. They move into the slag house. Just for a few weeks, they say. Just until things settle. They don't. Inside, the house is too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your teeth. Magda picks the corner with the least mildew. Toma boards up the back door, which keeps opening on its own. Lucia carves symbols into the floor. Protection runes? Toma asks. No, she replies. Landlord warnings. There is no landlord. No rent collector. No parish record. The slag house doesn't belong to anyone, which means it belongs to everyone, and thus to no one. It exists in a legal and spiritual limbo. A vacuum. And vacuums, as you know, tend to suck things in. Mainstream fact, medieval cities had problem properties, buildings associated with disease, murder, or scandal. Often left empty until desperation made them viable again. Fringe detail. Some properties were salted, fake rented to dissuade squatters. Beds made. Fires lit. But no one actually lived there. A ghost deterrent. Or a trap. Open debate, were some buildings intentionally cursed, not by myth but by policy? City records suggest certain properties were taxed differently, or had suspiciously short-term tenants. A bureaucratic haunting. The first night is uneventful. Cold. Damp. But still. The second night, they hear footsteps. Upstairs. There is no upstairs. The third night, the door they nailed shut opens again. This time, with a sigh. Lucia laughs it off. It's just air pressure. Or bad insulation. Toma doesn't sleep. Magda, though, Magda is blooming. She's talking again. Laughing. She starts drawing in charcoal, strange images. Eyes. Knotted rope. Buildings made of teeth. One morning, she tells them, this house used to be alive. Lucia arches a brow. And now? Magda grins. It's digesting. On the fifth night, they hear a voice. Not from inside the house, from within the walls. It's faint, but steady. Muttering in Old Church Latin. Lucia pushes her ear to the plaster. It's saying names, she whispers. Tenant names. Toma finds a list carved into a ceiling beam. Hundreds of names. Some scratched out. Some followed by symbols, daggers, XS, flames. At the bottom, his. Freshly carved. And below that, Magda's. Would you leave? Of course you would. Right? Except, where would you go? Back to the charnel house? Locked. Back to the guild? Burned that bridge. The drift? Still watching. Still deciding. So you stay. Because sometimes, even a cursed house is better than none. They try to bless it. Magda lights incense stolen from the cathedral. Lucia chants in tongues no one taught her. Toma buries a silver ring in the hearth, something he was saving. The house groans. Literally. Like it's annoyed. That night, they find a new door. In a wall that didn't have one yesterday. It opens to a stairwell. Leading down. Toma looks at Lucia. She sighs. We never get normal, do we? They go down. The cellar is older than the house. Roman bricks. Symbols from a dead empire. And in the center, a well. Dry. Cracked. Inside, a skeleton. Curled like it died in sleep. On its wrist, a bracelet made of teeth. Magda touches it. Tenant 0, she says. Lucia leans in. Do we rebury it? No, Magda says. We acknowledge it. And she does. Lights a candle. Speaks the name she somehow knows. The house exhales. That night, the upstairs footsteps stop. The muttering ceases. The back door stays shut. The house is still. They've made a deal, somehow. A truce. It will let them stay, for now. In exchange for what? They don't ask. Would you have dared to move in, just to escape the cold? In medieval cities, the question wasn't should you live in a haunted house. It was, can you afford not to? Toma begins fixing the roof. Magda sets up a tiny apothecary. Lucia paints ward signs. People in the drift start whispering about the slag house again, but this time with curiosity, not fear. Someone says it's alive. Someone else says it's protected. Someone, probably drunk, calls it the last free house. And in a way, it is. But freedom always attracts attention. Especially when it doesn't pay rent. By week's end, a knock on the door. 3 men in guild coats. One in a bishop's purple. Another in black. The third? Gerwin. Eviction notice, he says. You're squatting on sanctified land. Lucia folds her arms. Sanctified by what, exactly? Gerwin shrugs. History. Magda, from the corner, grins. History's wrong. The bishop leans forward. You'll be gone by morning. Or we light the walls. Toma's hand clenches. Lucia whispers, we'll need allies. The drift, maybe. Or something older. Something beneath. And that well? The one with the bracelet? Yeah. It just refilled itself. And it wasn't water. The rent is due in blood. It begins with whispers in the fog. Not gossip. Not hearsay. A different kind of whisper. Older. Hungrier. The kind of whisper that seeps through cracks in stone foundations and tickles the feet of sleepers. The kind that remembers names. Because the slag house, the last free house, has been marked. Not just by men in robes or the bishop's scrolls. But by something deeper. Something that used to own this land long before the guilds built streets over it. Before the churches claimed it. Before the walls rose. And now that something wants it back. The bishop's threat isn't empty. At dawn, Lucia sees them through a broken slat, a retinue of firebearers. Torches. Oil jars. City guards with the smug certainty of men given orders and told they'll be paid regardless. But the house is ready. Toma has reinforced the doors. Lucia has carved protection runes on the sills in goat blood. Magda sits cross-legged by the well in the cellar, murmuring words not taught in any monastery. The guards approach. They knock. No answer. They announce, "Vacate or be removed." Still silence. Then one of them, a boy, too young for a sword but holding one anyway, swings a hammer. The door doesn't break. The hammer rebounds and hits him in the nose. Blood. The house shudders. The torches flicker. And from beneath the floorboards comes a sound like 1,000 nails being pulled from wood at once. Lucia smiles. "Oh, you idiots. Let's talk about how medieval cities enforced housing law." Mainstream fact, many medieval cities had strict codes about squatting, especially on church land. Illegal tenants could be evicted by force, with militia backing, or worse, excommunication. Fringe detail. In some places, land could be reclaimed not just by law, but by ritual, burning the threshold and salting the ashes to close a house spiritually. If the threshold resisted burning, it was taken as a divine sign. Open debate, did some houses gain legal personhood? There's sparse, obscure documentation that certain buildings, particularly guildhalls or religious lodgings, were granted their own rights, separate from their owners. If true, that changes everything. Outside, the bishop begins chanting. Latin, of course. Holy words. Inside, Magda chuckles. He's using the wrong script. The air thickens. The ground moans. From the hearth, smoke pours out. But not smoke like from fire. Smoke like from memory. It forms shapes. Women. Men. Children. All past tenants. All not gone. The bishop freezes. One of the guards drops his torch. The fire catches the oil, but instead of spreading, it slinks backward, up the man's leg. He screams. And the slag house breathes in. Literally. A gust of wind, against logic, pulls the fire inward, into the walls. Gone. Would you run? Would you risk your salary, your standing, your soul, just to light one cursed house? 3 of the guards do. The bishop remains. He steps forward, holding aloft a relic, a bone fragment in glass. A saint's knuckle, he declares. Blessed by fire. Purifies. Lucia sighs. He really didn't read the lease. The house doesn't like relics. With a sharp crack, the floor splits under the bishop's feet. He falls into the cellar, not into the well, but beside it. Toma peers down. He's alive. Angry. Covered in soot and shame. But something's watching him. Magda murmurs, Tenant Zero says hello. They let him climb out. Barely. He stumbles into the street, dazed. Muttering about eyes in the brick. Hands in the mortar. He drops the relic. It shatters. The guards carry him away. The fire-bearers are gone. The eviction is, unofficially, rescinded. But they've made an enemy. Several, in fact. The bishop will petition the archbishop. The guild will tighten rules. The drift is uneasy, freedom is beautiful, yes, but unstable freedom? That's dangerous. Toma, Lucia, and Magda sit around a crooked table that night. We can't keep fighting everyone, Lucia says. Toma nods. Then we stop being a target. Magda sips something green. Or we become a sanctuary. They blink. What? Toma asks. She sets down her mug. We open the house. To whom? To the forgotten. The hunted. The frozen. They start small. An old man with frostbite, tossed from the Wool Guild's infirmary. A girl who can't speak, with bruises under her collar. A runaway monk who whispers numbers in his sleep. Each one, taken in. Each one, sleeping safe. Each one, adding a little something to the house. Not bricks. Not furniture. Memory. The slag house grows warmer. Lights its own hearth sometimes. Shifts the floorboards when it senses an argument brewing. Locks its doors before intruders arrive. It's becoming aware. Not malevolent. Protective. But it wants something in return. Would you live in a house that could feel? That could remember when you lied? Knew when you were cruel? Recalled who you welcomed and who you turned away? Because that's what's happening now. The slag house is becoming the first autonomous shelter. Not recognized by the city, the guilds, or the church. But recognized by those who need it. The drift whispers new names. The house that speaks. The hidden hearth. The place of no debt. Lucia likes that one. No rent, no questions, no judgment. Magda sketches a sigil, a blend of Roman, Gothic, and something older, and nails it to the door. The first tenant draws it on her cloak. By week's end, 5 more show up. By month's end, 17. Toma adds bunks. Lucia installs a secret bell system. Magda names the well. Not aloud. Just, in her head. The name is a secret. Then, one rainy night, Gerwin appears. Soaked. Pale. He holds his mason's insignia like it's broken. They're coming, he says. All of them. Who? Toma asks. Everyone. Because the house? It's no longer just a home. It's a revolution. And revolutions? They don't pay rent, either. The street of broken walls. Gerwin stands dripping in the doorway like a confession no one asked for. His cloak clings to his frame like a funeral shroud, and behind him, thunder rolls over the rooftops like distant cannon fire. They've declared it illegal, he says. The house. You. All of it. Toma clenches his jaw. Illegal how? It's not even on the city records. Exactly, Gerwin replies. That's what scared them. The door creaks as if it's thinking. Somewhere deep in the foundation, a groan rolls upward like a sleeping giant shifting in its grave. Lucia crosses her arms. So what now? The city sends a priest with a torch in one hand and a lawyer in the other? Gerwin doesn't laugh. No, he says. They're sending the wall breakers. Silence. Even the wind outside seems to pause. Let's rewind. Who were the wall breakers? Mainstream fact, most medieval cities had demolition crews, often employed by guilds or civic councils, tasked with clearing unsafe or unauthorized structures, especially during urban redesigns. Fringe detail, Some of these crews doubled as covert enforcers. They could demolish a house overnight, sometimes with families still inside, then claim the building was a fire hazard. No compensation. No inquiry. Open scholarly debate. Were the wall-breakers ever spiritual agents? Legends suggest some were trained in exorcism rites, demolition as purification, and sanctioned haunt cleansing. Half Mason, half Inquisitor. The wall-breakers weren't just builders in reverse. They were silencers. And they've just been hired. They're on the marcher's row now, Gerwin says. Making their way house by house. Stabilizing the foundations, they claim. Magda laughs, short, dry, a bitter scrap of sound. Do they even know what this house is sitting on? They don't care, Gerwin says. They've been promised coin, favor, and titles. And absolution. Lucia curses. We don't have the numbers to fight them. Not alone. Toma nods slowly. Then we won't fight alone. He walks to the hearth and strikes the iron bell once. The sound is low, resonant, and somehow, invitational. Moments later, a knock at the back door. Then another. Then 3 at once. The drift is answering. They come cloaked, cowled, shadow-faced. Not all are fighters, some are cobblers, cooks, thieves. One is a retired laundress with a crossbow. Another is a midwife who speaks to cats. But they come. Because the slag house helped them. Because the streets never forget kindness, not really. Magda hands out chalk. Draw the sigil on anything you want protected. Walls. Boots. Your skin. Lucia coordinates traps, not lethal, but discouraging. Pitfalls, distraction candles, misdirection mirrors. Guerrilla warfare in miniature. Toma reinforces the beams with salvaged iron. Not perfect. But enough. And still, the storm builds. That night, the house fills with voices. Some alive. Some not. The well burbles softly. A new whisper, a warning. They're 3 streets away. Midnight. A single horn. The first hammer strike lands like a gunshot. Wood splinters. The drift doesn't run. They scatter, reappear, confuse. Smoke bombs. Firecrackers. A beehive, hurled from the 2nd floor. Chaos. The wall breakers are methodical, slow, heavy, armored in pride. But the house shifts beneath them. Floors tilt. Hallways stretch. Walls seem to move when unobserved. One man swings a hammer and finds himself back where he started. Another tries the cellar, and is never seen again. The house isn't invulnerable. But it refuses. Lucia holds the front line, slingshot and dagger in hand. Magda whispers to the walls, coaxing something, not control, but agreement. Toma confronts the wallbreaker captain face to face. You can't tear down a home that wants to stand, he says. The captain smirks. Everything falls eventually. Then the floor beneath him collapses. Not from magic. From foundation rot. The house weaponizes its own brokenness. A metaphor too perfect for YouTube? Maybe. But real. Would you defend a home like this? Even if it had ghosts? Even if it had teeth? Because what they're building isn't just a shelter anymore. It's an idea. And ideas? They're much harder to evict. At dawn, the wall breakers retreat. Not defeated, delayed. They regroup outside the drift. Waiting. Planning. Gerwin watches from the shadows. Not helping. Not harming. Just watching. Lucia slumps against the wall. They'll come back. Toma nods. But so will we. Magda stands by the cellar and whispers, they're not done helping either. And for a moment, the entire house hums. Just slightly. That morning, 3 more refugees arrive. One carries a lute. One limps. One doesn't speak but hugs everyone, twice. They saw the sigil scratched into a gate in another city. The house welcomes them. The doors open, before they knock. The well glows faintly. And outside, for the first time in weeks, sunlight breaks through the smog. The revolution isn't over. But the house? It's still standing. And it's hungry. But not for blood. For belonging. Would you stay, even knowing what's beneath? Some do. Some don't. But the sigil spreads. A message. A map. A myth. And in the council chambers, the bishop sharpens his pen. Because if fire won't erase the house, paper just might. Paper cuts deeper than fire. In a tower above the city, where the stones are imported and the floors creak only when summoned to, the bishop writes. Ink black as crow's wings. Feathered quill. Velum stretched like cured skin. He does not rush. He is a man of letters, after all. And he knows, a pen strokes more cleanly than a blade. Fire burns briefly, but a charter? A decree? That burns for centuries. Let them keep their walls, he mutters. We will take the ground beneath. He signs the first scroll. Petition for revision of ownership, the slag house. The real war is quiet now. No more hammering at midnight. No screaming torches. Just parchment, wax seals, and men in robes who smile like executioners in slow motion. Back in the drift, things feel safe. Too safe. The kind of safe that hums with tension, like the pause before a note resolves in a song you've heard before. Toma doesn't trust it. Lucia hates it. Magda listens. The house feels different. Not ill, just still. Like it's holding its breath. And then the letter arrives. A scroll nailed to the door. Official. Gold stamped. It reads, this structure has been classified as transitory spiritual uncertainty and is therefore subject to ecclesiastical condemnation under Article 17, Codex Artium Habitandi. Lucia stares. That's not even a real law. Gerwin confirms. It is now. Let's break that down. Mainstream fact, in late medieval cities, canon law could override civic law in matters of property, especially if the church argued a building had spiritual implications, curses, heresies, hauntings. Fringe detail, some city councils invented placeholder laws, just to label unwanted buildings as non-conforming. Once labeled, a structure could be seized, sold, or razed. These laws were sometimes written after the structure was condemned, retroactive injustice. Open scholarly debate: did the church fabricate ghosts to justify demolition? Several historical documents reference spectral audits, divine inspections that always seem to condemn politically inconvenient buildings. The slag house is now considered a spiritual threat. Which is hilarious, considering it's the only house in the drift that feeds children. Magda snorts. Spiritual threat? We serve soup. But it doesn't matter. The council has signed. The guilds have approved. The church has blessed the scroll. Even the Masons' hall is silent. Gerwin doesn't show up for 3 days. When he does, he looks broken. Like a statue cracked from the inside. They've offered me my own crew, he says. If I help clear the site. Lucia doesn't yell. She just nods. And? He doesn't answer. Not really. He just leaves again. So what do you do when law is a weapon? When parchment is deadlier than pitchforks? You adapt. The drift rallies. They forge new documentation. Real? Not quite. Effective? Sometimes. Magda finds an old monastery record, lists the slag house as a pilgrim stopover. She tweaks the ink. Toma bribes a clerk to misfile the scroll. Lucia organizes the tenants into a domestic religious cooperative. It's a fake sect, sure, but they all agree to chant on Thursdays and wear gray scarves. It's all absurd. And it all kind of works. But the bishop is patient. He's not trying to win quickly. He's trying to outlast. Paper doesn't tire. The next scroll arrives by hawk. It lands on the windowsill, ties its own knot, and waits. Magda reads it out loud. We summon the inhabitant spirits of the slag house to appear before the Office of Sanctified Urban Management on the 14th day of frost. Toma raises a brow. They're subpoenaing the house? Lucia grins. Guess we'll need a translator. They send a reply. A blank sheet. Dipped in water from the well. The hawk explodes midair. Just, poof. No body. No scream. Just feathers and a faint whimper on the wind. Yeah. The house is done being subtle. That night, the sigil on the door starts glowing faintly. Every brick in the wall seems to breathe. A new hallway appears, one that wasn't there before. Inside, a room. Empty. Except for a table. And on it? One pen. One sheet of paper. Lucia stares at it for a long time. Is it writing back? Magda nods slowly. It wants to file its petition. What if a house could write its own defense? What if shelter, memory, and pain could draft a rebuttal? Would you read it? Would you listen? They leave the page alone. In the morning, it's full. Words in every known script. Even a few unknown. No signature. Just, I am not yours. Lucia delivers it herself. To the bishop. She hands it to him with both hands. He doesn't thank her. Doesn't look at it. He drops it into the hearth. The fire dies. Not flares. Dies. Stone cold. Then reignites 2 seconds later in blue. He frowns. Looks at her. You've made your point. She smiles. So has the house. But the bishop doesn't need fire. He's already made the final move. He unrolls a final scroll. Signed by the High Council of Trade and Sanctity. It decrees. The district known as the Drift shall be reclassified as temporarily redevelopable slum, and all properties within are forfeit. That's not just eviction. That's annihilation. And it starts in 3 days. Would you run? Would you fight? Would you let it go? They don't know yet. But the house? It's waking up. It knows. And it's not going down without making the city feel it. 3 days. And then the streets burn. The 3-day siege. The city doesn't call it war. They call it urban purification. Which sounds like a bath, not a battlefield. But the smell of pitch and cordite says otherwise. On the first morning, the bells don't ring. Not the chapel, not the guildhall, not even the butcher's triangle. Instead, there's silence. Thick and anticipatory. The kind of silence that knows it's about to be filled with breaking things. Then, the first gate falls. Not the city wall. Not a fortress. A bakery. Smashed by a ram bearing the crest of the council. Flour spills across the street like smoke. The message is clear, this isn't about homes anymore. It's about control. Lucia watches from the second floor of the slag house, sharpening her knives. They've brought engineers, she says. Toma grunts. They've brought cowards with better tools. Gerwin returns, at last. He looks tired. Dusty. He hands Toma a map. They're coming from 4 streets. Corner maneuver. Classic siege geometry. They want to box the house in. Why help us now? Lucia asks. Gerwin shrugs. Because they burned my father's forge last night. Said it was contaminated. He holds up a singed horseshoe. Guess we're all contaminated now. Mainstream fact, medieval cities often destroyed entire districts to curb plagues, remove dissent, or make room for higher value residents. These were sometimes called cleansings. Fringe detail, some sources describe ghost fires, blazes that consumed only the homes of the poor, leaving noble manors untouched. Urban legend? Or engineered catastrophe? Open scholarly debate. Was the Drift's final destruction part of a larger pattern across European cities, an intentional, class-driven act of urban renewal centuries before gentrification had a name? Magda lights incense. Not for peace. For defense. The house is ready. It rearranges itself slightly each hour. Hallways shift. Ceilings sag where they should rise. A new stairwell appears, then vanishes. Every room now watches. The walls breathe slower. Deeper. Hungry. On the second day, the city escalates. They bring trebuchets. Yes. Trebuchets. Because nothing says reasonable civic policy like launching rocks through residential windows. The first one misses and crushes a chicken coop 3 blocks down. The second lands in the old tannery, which promptly explodes. They try a third. The rock vanishes midair. Gone. Mid-flight. Lucia watches it disappear and just mutters, "Good girl," to the house. But the council has more than rocks. They bring the orators next. Men and women in blue robes, chanting at the building like lawyers trying to sue a volcano. They recite laws older than the city. Curses thinly veiled as condemnations. Prayers with edges. The house shudders. The well begins to boil. Magda takes Toma's hand. She's hurting. Toma nods. We hold. One more day. That night, the house opens a door that shouldn't exist. It leads outside, not to the street, but to the archives beneath City Hall. Lucia and Gerwin slip through. In 12 minutes, they swap scrolls. The official map of the drift now shows it as Protected Heritage Sanctuary. Will it hold? Probably not. But it's messy. And messy slows things down. Would you destroy a place just because it makes you feel guilty? Because that's what this is. The city knows what it owes the drift. What it's built on. What it's stolen. They want it erased, not because it's dangerous, but because it's honest. And honesty is terrifying. Third day. Dawn comes in gray. 100 soldiers at the boundary. Red armor. Flaming torches. A cannon, borrowed from the Port Authority. This is it. Lucia kisses the front door. Toma carries the banner, stitched from scraps of every tenant's clothing. Magda holds the book of names. Not a holy book. Just every person who ever called the house home. Even the ghosts. Even the ones who died alone. They read the names aloud. The house listens. The house responds. It starts to rain. Hard. Like the sky itself has grief. The soldiers move. Step by step. No sudden charge. Just methodical. Inevitable. Until they reach the threshold. Then stop. Because the street is gone. Not destroyed. Just missing. A chasm now stands between them and the slag house. Wide. Bottomless. And in it, whispers. Memories. Sobs. Lullabies. The well has overflowed. Not with water. With everything it ever held. A single soldier tries to leap the gap. He makes it. For a second. Then a door opens beneath his feet, in midair, and he falls through it. No scream. Just the sound of a baby crying from the darkness. They don't try again. And then, the final scroll arrives. Dropped by hand. No messenger. Just floating. It lands in the courtyard. Toma picks it up. Reads aloud. This structure is no longer considered within municipal jurisdiction. It exists outside our spatial and legal boundaries. Effective immediately. Lucia frowns. What does that mean? Gerwin blinks. They're unmapping it. Magda gasps. They're erasing us. Would you let yourself be forgotten to be free? Because that's the offer. The slag house won't be destroyed. But it also won't exist. Not on paper. Not on maps. Not in records. And the house? The house agrees. It begins to fade. Not vanish. Just slip. One brick at a time. One street lamp blink at a time. The well glows a final time, bright enough to blind. And then, gone. Only the rain remains. And the smell of bread from a bakery that doesn't exist anymore. Later, a clerk looks at the city's blueprints and asks, "Hey, what's that empty space in the middle of the drift?" No one knows. No one remembers. But some nights, a light flickers there. And if you knock 3 times, and mean it, a door might open. Would you knock? Would you step into a story that doesn't want to end? Some do. And the house welcomes them. Still. Always. Aftermath echoes through stone. There are no headlines. No sermons. No proclamations about what happened in the drift. Because officially, it didn't. The scrolls are gone. The maps have been redrawn. And the slag house? Never existed. The city gets quieter. Uneasy. Like a banquet after the last course, when nobody wants to be the first to leave. But the people? The people remember. Even if they're not supposed to. Gerwin works alone now, reforging horseshoes in a borrowed forge under a bridge that smells like wet rust. He hums the names of those who lived. Not songs, just syllables, muttered like prayers. He won't say it aloud, but he knows, the slag house is still out there. Somewhere. He saw it. In the reflection of the canal one night. For a second, just a shimmer, a door with a familiar crack running through it. Then it was gone. Lucia? She vanished. Word on the street is that she walks the boundary streets in a long coat, whispering to walls, asking them if they've heard any creaking floorboards or tasted old soup. Some say she can open doors that don't exist. Others say she's building something new. Magda joined a convent. Sort of. Not one of the official ones, this one's in a tower with no bell. She writes. Constantly. But not prayers. Just testimonies. Accounts. Memories. Pages and pages of names. Rooms. Meals. Sounds. 1 page per tenant of the slag house. She calls it her countermap. Because if the city erased the slag house from reality, she's determined to rebuild it in memory. Mainstream fact, entire neighborhoods in medieval cities were often lost to history through deliberate cartographic erasure, removed from city records, unmentioned in chronicles. It was a political and spiritual cleansing. Fringe detail, in Bruges, Ghent, and parts of Prague, there are rumors of phantom blocks, areas where compasses fail and buildings vanish when described aloud. Locals believe they are remnants of unwritten cities. Open scholarly debate, can memory serve as architecture? Is it possible that a place can persist simply because people refuse to forget it, even when all physical traces are gone? There's a child. Barefoot. Hair like storm clouds. She was born in the drift. Not during its life, but during its fading. They call her Rhine. She collects things that shouldn't exist. Clay fragments that glow faintly. A half-burned map labeled in languages no one recognizes. A ring with a symbol of a door crossed by a well. One night, she's caught trespassing in the bishop's crypt. She doesn't speak. Just smiles, leaves a paper flower behind, and vanishes through a wall. That wall is torn down 3 months later. Behind it, nothing. Literally nothing. Just a black space. An absence. No sound. No light. Some guards say they heard music. Others swear it whispered their names. The city panics. Quietly. They hire theologians to inspect the anomaly. They declare it a symbolic vacuum. But no one goes near it again. They build a statue to civic order in front of it. It sinks 3 inches every week. Would you believe a house can live without bricks? Can speak without walls? Can fight without weapons? That's what haunts them now. Not fire. Not rebels. Not riots. But the idea that somewhere, a house remembers being alive. And might return. A scribe in the city's record hall discovers an anomaly in the census. A gap. Exactly 137 people. No names. No homes. Just blank lines where entries should be. He calls it the drifted. No one believes him. So he starts writing their stories himself. Some nights, under a waning moon, people still hear it. Creaking boards. A humming pipe. A cough. A lullaby. Soft. Tender. Not frightening. Just familiar. Like a place that never asked to be remembered, but was anyway. Magda receives a letter. No seal. Just folded parchment. Inside, a single line. Kitchen window still sticks in the summer. She laughs. Cries. Then starts baking. She leaves the bread on her sill. Sometimes it's gone in the morning. Sometimes there's a new brick beside it. Never the same color. Always warm. The drift becomes a myth. And like all myths, it starts to shape things. A new tenement is built, far from the city center. Different builders. Different materials. But the blueprint? Strangely familiar. A curved stairwell. A well in the courtyard. A kitchen with too many cabinets. And a hallway that ends in a blank wall, but sometimes opens. People say it feels like it remembers something. They call it Slag 2. Would you live there? Even if it had no address? No title? Only history? Because maybe that's what homes really are. Not purchases. Not legal claims. But memory, intention, and shared breath. One night, a child knocks on their own front door. Not the inside. The outside. And it opens. Not just the door. But a way back. They step through. And somewhere, under a crooked beam and next to a stove that hisses lullabies, the slag house breathes again. Welcome home. The city's amnesia. Time moves like syrup now. Slow, sticky, and just sweet enough to distract you from the rot beneath. The city has moved on. Or so it claims. The council holds parades. Festivals. Ribbon cuttings. They name new neighborhoods things like Sunvale and Upper Drift, as if slapping sunshine on a scar will keep it from itching. But underneath the cobbles, the ghost of something still breathes. Not angry. Just waiting. In the archives beneath the Cathedral of St. Kelm, a scribe named Elias finds something peculiar. He isn't looking for trouble. He's just trying to catalog land grants from the year of the Black Rain. But there, between pages, he finds a folded parchment, dry, crackling, with no city seal. Unfolded, it reads, "This house remembers." Do you? No signature. No date. But Elias swears the ink smells faintly of cinnamon and chimney smoke. He tucks it into his sleeve. 2 weeks later, he resigns and disappears. His desk drawer holds a map of the drift, drawn in reverse. Mainstream fact: medieval bureaucracies, especially in ecclesiastical cities, were riddled with scribes who moonlighted as record hiders and quiet saboteurs. Many were literate monks and lower clergy with grudges and secret sympathies. Fringe detail: a handful of city scrolls in Krakow and Genoa bear ink that fluoresces under moonlight, revealing shadow addresses, places that never appear on official daytime maps. Scholars call them ghost listings. Open scholarly debate: were these errors, artistic flourishes, or signs of parallel mapping systems? Could there have been a medieval cartography of memory, one only the marginalized understood? Gerwin reappears. Briefly. He's older. Beard gone silver. He runs a blacksmith's shop called Drift Iron in a fishing town 2 days south. When people ask about the name, he shrugs. Just something I dreamed once. But he has a drawer full of keys. Hundreds of them. Each one different. Some ancient. Some new. He never uses them. Just polishes them and hums to himself. Some nights, he leaves one on the windowsill. The next morning, it's gone. In the city's new theater district, a play debuts, The House with No Threshold. No one knows who wrote it. The actors never rehearse. They say the script arrives 1 page at a time, left in the prop room under the floorboards. Audiences weep. Not because it's sad, but because it feels like something they've forgotten. The city tries to shut it down. The mayor's niece attends and vanishes backstage. She returns a week later with a loaf of rye and a story no one understands. They leave the theater alone after that. Would you trust a story if no one claimed it? If it had no author, just intention? The drift becomes an adjective. Drift built. Drift born. Drift bound. Children whisper it into wells. Adults pretend they don't know what it means. But when a chimney groans strangely or a cellar smells of lavender, someone always mutters. The drift's still listening. Lucia resurfaces. She doesn't look older. She doesn't look anything. She walks like scaffolding held together by stubbornness and coffee. She arrives during the winter bread riots. Not to fight. Just to watch. She sits on rooftops, sipping from a metal mug and passing notes to crows. When asked who she is, she says, "I'm what happens when you tear a house out of someone's chest and expect them to keep walking." Then she smiles. And vanishes. In the North Quarter, an entire row of houses shifts 3 inches overnight. No quake. No storm. Just moves. They now align perfectly with a long-forgotten street from the original drift. A surveyor loses his job over it. Later, in a tavern, drunk off plum brandy, he tells anyone who'll listen. The houses are dreaming. I saw it. Would you live in a place that dreams of itself? And of you? Because that's the danger now. The city isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by memory. Magda's pages reach the guild scribes. At first, they mock them. Old crone fiction, they snort. Then they start copying them. Because people read them. People ask for more. The council bans them. Which makes them spread faster. Soon, everyone wants to live in a house with memory. Suddenly, builders add cracks on purpose. Uneven beams. Handmade windows. Secret compartments. They call it authentic medieval style. They charge triple rent. A boy selling buttons on the corner calls it driftcore. Lucia would hate that. But she'd laugh, too. Probably. The slag house? Still missing. But not gone. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, it knocks. Not on your door. Through it. Like it's checking. Seeing if you're ready. Would you answer? Would you walk through? Would you let yourself be remembered? The city builds a monument. They don't know why. It's just a hunch. A circle of stones around a dry well in the market district. There's no plaque. No date. But people leave candles. Scraps of fabric. Keys. And in the morning, they're always gone. The well remains dry. Except once. When a child falls in chasing a marble. They're pulled out 2 minutes later, clean, dry, smiling. Holding a loaf of bread that smells like cinnamon. Rhine, now nearly grown, returns to the city one summer night. She stands before the dry well, holding a lantern that glows blue. She places a key inside. Waits. Nothing happens. She nods. And walks away. Behind her, the wind whistles. A low hum. Like pipes warming up. A door creaks. And in the distance, a faint laugh. Would you have walked away? Or waited? And if the house came back, would you be ready to go home? Even if it never had your name? Even if it never promised to stay? The city forgets. But the house remembers. And remembering is the first kind of magic. Blueprints made of ash. The year is 1331. Or maybe 1333. No one agrees anymore. The city has changed, subtly, like a painting redrawn by a ghostly hand. Alleys curve slightly off now. Doors end up where windows once were. A new bakery burns down and is replaced by a tiny schoolhouse that seems far too old, even though the bricks are brand new. People stop asking why. They just call it settling. But the drift isn't done. It never asked to return. It simply refused to leave. In a dark corner of the stonemasons' guildhall, an apprentice named Will opens an old crate of lime mortar and finds bones. Not human. Not animal either. Small, delicate, jointed like fingers. Made of stone, somehow. He doesn't tell anyone. Just buries them beneath the new cathedral spire. That night, the spire leans 5 degrees to the left. It hums. Mainstream fact, medieval cathedrals and buildings often settled unevenly, with spires or towers tilting over time. Engineers today believe it was due to unstable subsoils. Locals back then? They thought the buildings were reacting to something. Fringe detail. In a 1372 ledger from Chartres, there's an entry for 5 bolts for dream door, next to orders for timber and stone. No such structure appears in city records. The entry is crossed out in blood-red ink. Open scholarly debate. Were there deliberate efforts to rebuild forbidden or mythical structures under new names? Could it be that cities encoded secret architectural memory into errors, tilts, misalignments, or strange blueprints? There's a new guild in town. They don't advertise. They don't meet during the day. They call themselves the Hollow Tilers. Their insignia, an open door with no hinges. Members wear gloves made of ash and soot. People say they're not builders, they're listeners. They don't lay bricks. They awaken them. Will joins them. Not because he believes, but because one day, while restoring an inn cellar, he uncovers a beam with a single word carved into it. Gerwin. Not in ink. Burned into the wood. Fresh. He's never told anyone that name. Never written it down. Just heard it. Once, in a dream. He signs up the next day. Would you join a guild that doesn't build? Would you trust a trade passed down through memory alone? Magda's final manuscript circulates like wildfire. No title. No author name. Just a cover, a charcoal drawing of a stove, cracked open like a ribcage. Inside, floor plans, tenant names, meals cooked on Tuesdays, arguments in stairwells, repairs never made. People read it and feel homesick for a place they've never seen. It spreads through back alleys and bakeries. In response, the council issues a decree. Unauthorized mapping is heresy. People map faster. Gerwin's keys begin to change. He wakes up one morning to find them multiplying. One glows faintly blue. Another hums like a lullaby. They stop fitting any lock. But they're not meant to open doors anymore. They're meant to remember them. Lucia sends a letter to no one. It reads, "If memory is the mortar, then grief is the lime. And this house was built with both." It arrives at the mayor's desk, addressed in crayon. No one knows how. A scholar named Eloise, young, sharp, dismissive, sets out to disprove the drift myth once and for all. She charts building permits. Digs through taxes. Traces water lines. Then she disappears for 3 weeks. When she returns, she writes a single sentence in her journal. "I found a second front door in my house. It leads to my mother's voice." She never writes again. But her house gains a second chimney. It smokes only at night. Would you believe a house could remember someone who never lived in it? Would you call that haunting, or grace? In a new part of town, a child is born in a house with no street number. When the census takers come, the house refuses to open its door. They knock. They beg. They even threaten. But nothing. Eventually, the child is listed as not present, which becomes a new phrase in official records. Not present begins showing up more often. It becomes a category. Then a warning. Then a myth. The city tries to pave over the old drift roads. Every time, the stones shift back by morning. Not all of them, just enough. Enough to make the paving crews question whether they were ever there to begin with. A new tavern opens, the threshold. Inside, the ale is always warm. The hearth is always lit. And no one ever remembers how they got there. They just know the barkeep never writes down orders, but always gets them right. There's no door in. Just a hallway. And a whisper, "Welcome back." Gerwin dies. Peacefully. At home, in a bed made of birch and soot. His last words, tell her the window stopped sticking. No one knows who her is. Except maybe Magda, who doesn't attend the funeral, but leaves a pie on his grave, covered in keys. A year later, a new building appears on the edge of town. No one sees it built, but it's there. Perfectly familiar. Wood too old. Windows too warm. A crooked stair. A kitchen with a door that sticks. Inside, nothing. And everything. The city doesn't register it. But people find it. And when they leave, they remember things they never knew. A song. A taste. A scar. A goodbye. Would you go inside? Even knowing it might not let you leave the same? Because now the house isn't just a place. It's a pattern. A wound. A lullaby. A threat. A promise. It's what happens when memory refuses to go quietly, and instead, builds something. The tenant that was never born. Somewhere in the northern bend of the river, past the grain silos and the timber docks, there's a row of tenements so old the stone speaks a dialect no mason remembers. The doors curve inward. The windows tilt upward, as if still watching for someone, or something, long overdue. One of those tenements, house number 17, has had no official occupant for over 30 years. And yet, the upstairs window fogs up every winter night. From the inside. It begins with a birth that doesn't happen. A woman named Yold rents a room in house 17 for a week. She is visibly pregnant, exhausted, and quiet. The neighbors hear lullabies hummed through the walls. Then, silence. Yold leaves without the child. Her belly flat, her eyes storm dark. When asked, she says only, "The house held it for me." People laugh. Uneasily. Until the crying starts. Mainstream fact, in medieval urban records, it wasn't uncommon for babies to be listed without names, or with placeholders like infants non, unnamed infant. Some were never recorded at all, especially stillbirths or children born outside of wedlock. Fringe detail, a single ledger from Ghent lists child drift as a taxpayer in 1382. No other references to that name exist. The handwriting is frantic. The ink is brown-red, likely blood. Open scholarly debate, could urban legends around forgotten children, ghost tenants, changelings, or the unlived, reflect real socio-political taboos erased from official memory. And did certain households become repositories of these refused presences? The crying grows louder. Only at night. Only when the wind passes northward. The city sends inspectors. They hear nothing. But their shoes come back covered in soot and milk. One resigns. One vanishes. One becomes a nun. The landlord sells the building to the city. The city forgets it owns it. People begin leaving offerings on the stoop, pacifiers, ribbons, loaves of honey bread. Not because they believe, but because the door creaks open whenever they don't. Would you comfort a tenant who never breathed? Would you feed a ghost too young to know hunger? One morning, Lucia returns. She stands in front of house 17, not knocking, not entering. Just listening. Ryan joins her. They don't speak. Until Lucia says. She gave it her grief. It made a child out of it. Ryan nods. Then, is that allowed? Lucia shrugs. Not by the council. But grief has better lawyers. Inside, nothing changes. The house doesn't clean itself. The rooms gather dust. But the cradle in the corner never gets dusty. And the music box on the windowsill plays a tune no one remembers teaching it. Gerwin once told a story, long ago, about a house that wanted something so badly, it made it real. Not with bricks or beams, but with need. Now, the city sees the drift for what it is. Not a slum. Not a district. But a heartbeat. Pounding beneath everything. A memory that insists. A scholar named Tom begins a new field, hauntology of habitations. He publishes a paper, Tenancy Without Occupation, Soul Theory and Ghost Architecture. It's laughed out of every university. Then copied in every secret guild archive. They know what it means. They've seen the walls breathe. Would you live in a place that mourns something you've never known? That sings lullabies to something not gone, just unmade? The mayor changes. A young woman named Eloise, yes, that Eloise, takes office. Her first act? She removes the zoning barriers around the drift. Then she walks the length of the old tenement line barefoot. She writes one sentence in her journal. The city is not broken. It's remembering. Soon, the houses begin to glow. Subtly. A shimmer under the surface. Not magical. Just aware. People start moving back. Not because it's affordable, but because it feels right. Like waking up in a room you didn't know you loved. At house 17, the upstairs window fogs again. Lucia, now old, walks up the steps. She presses her palm to the glass. Inside, a crib. Empty. Full. She smiles. And for the first time, the house opens itself to her. No creak. No protest. Just warmth. Like an exhale. She steps in. And for a moment, a fraction, we see her as she was. Young. Scared. Scraped knees and broken hope. A girl who once mapped a home she couldn't afford. Now walking into the arms of something that never asked her to. but held space anyway. Would you let a house raise you? Not with rules, but with memory? The crying stops. Not because it ends, but because it's been heard. And nothing haunts louder than a grief unspoken. The council stops tracking tenants. They just ask, does the house know you? And if the house answers yes, that's enough. A new kind of map circulates. Hand-drawn. No streets. Just names. Memories. Smells. Where I first loved. Where she left me. Where the walls whispered blue. They're not useful for directions, but they always get you home. In the cathedral, a candle burns for the unclaimed. Every night, someone new lights it. No one ever admits it. No one needs to. In the final pages of Magda's journal, posthumously discovered beneath a floorboard in a house that technically shouldn't exist, she writes, "The drift never wanted to be understood. It wanted to be forgiven. Forgiven for what? For reminding us that homes are never just wood and stone. They are grief that found a floor plan. Joy that stuck like pitch. Hope shaped like a hallway. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the house has always wanted. Not tenants. Not rent. Not repairs. Just to be known. And not be alone. Would you let it know you? Would you let yourself belong? The house at the end of the map. There's a part of the city now left off every official chart. Not forbidden. Not hidden. Just ignored. The scribes call it a recording error. The taxmen call it a non-zone. Everyone else? They call it home. But not with a capital H, like in sermons or real estate pitches. This is the whisper version of home, said with cracked lips and tired breath. The one you dream of when you're sleeping in the wrong century. And at its center, a house that was never built. No blueprints. No sponsor. No name. But everyone recognizes it. It's a little too small to fit everyone who remembers it. And yet it does. Tonight, a boy named Oren walks its halls. He's never seen this place before. Not really. But he dreamed of it last week. Or maybe last lifetime. The floorboards creak like polite conversation. The air smells like pine sap, burnt bread, and someone's grandmother's perfume, the kind that stings and comforts at the same time. There are pictures on the wall. Not of people. But of moments. A coat left too long in the rain. A stair skipped on the way up. The sound of soup boiling too hard. Mainstream fact, in medieval Europe, many homes were inherited or assigned not by deed, but by story. Families claimed occupancy by lineage, lore, or the blessing of neighbors. Fringe detail, in Prague, 1419, a man named Jacob wrote in a city petition that he had lived in House of the Wind since my sorrow began. No such address existed, yet 6 other witnesses co-signed his occupancy. The council allowed it. Open scholarly debate. Some historians argue that medieval cities weren't just built, they grew in response to memory, grief, and myth. The question remains, was this accidental? Or a kind of collective architecture? Oren finds the kitchen. There's always a kitchen. And someone's left out bread. It's warm. It shouldn't be. But it is. Would you eat it? Would you let yourself be fed by memory? In the cellar, there are stairs that go deeper than the earth. Not in a spooky way. Just in a true way. They go past the parts of you you don't speak of. The times you left when you should have stayed. The doors you locked so hard you forgot what was behind them. And the house? It remembers all of it. And forgives every part. There's a room at the back, small, square, waiting. Inside is a chair. On it, a map. No streets. No borders. Just lines of longing. Points marked with phrases like, where she first sang. Where I dropped the letter. Where the silence became kind. And at the center, a tiny dot. Labeled. You. Would you follow a map that ends in yourself? Would you trust it? Back in the city proper, people begin drawing again. Not diagrams. Not land plots. Just dreams. Some are circular. Some spiral inward. Some look like people. All of them are homes. And all of them are real. Even if they've never been built. Lucia dies quietly. On a porch that shouldn't exist. Facing a sunrise the city doesn't record. Her last words, heard only by a bird and a kettle. Tell the house, thank you. The kettle whistles once. Then stops. The drift doesn't vanish. It doesn't rise up. It doesn't burn. It just settles. Like an old quilt smoothed over your shoulders. Like grief that learned how to hold hands. A child grows up in the house at the end of the map. They never know fear. Only mystery. They learn how to listen to walls. How to braid silence. How to write with windows. One day, they draw a new door. Just with chalk. On the back fence. And the next morning, it opens. Would you walk through? Even knowing there's no coming back. Even knowing there's nothing to come back from. The house doesn't need you. But it hopes for you. And maybe that's the most sacred kind of place. The one that would survive without you. But chooses not to. You, sitting there, wherever you are, watching from a place with electric light and Wi-Fi and a pause button. You know this story isn't real. Right? It's just a bedtime fable. A thought experiment. A city-shaped poem. A ghost-wrapped metaphor for love and loss and the fear of being forgotten. You know that. And yet, why do you remember the way the stove creaked? Why do you taste burnt honey in the back of your throat? Why does the word Gerwin feel like someone who missed you? This house, this story, was never about architecture. It was always about you. So here's your final question. Would you knock? Would you let the house open itself? Would you stay? Even for a while? The city has quieted now. The candles have guttered down to ember. The wind is gentle, the kind that rustles leaves without asking them to fall. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell hums, not tolling, just remembering how. The drift sleeps. But not like the dead. It sleeps like a garden beneath snow. Like parchment waiting for ink. Like a house whose door has been left slightly ajar, just in case someone remembers the way back. You've followed the maps tonight, not the ones etched in ink, but the ones scribbled in feeling. Regret and longing. Gratitude and hunger. You've walked through thresholds that never existed, and still somehow knew the creak of the floor. Maybe this isn't a story about houses at all. Maybe it's about the spaces we carry, the rooms built out of memory. The roofs we raise for people we've lost. The cellars where our younger selves still hide in candlelight, waiting for permission to come upstairs. What if home was never a place? What if it's just the silence that loves us back? Tonight, let the walls of your own life hold you a little tighter. Not because they remember anything, but because you do. You, the historian of your own heart. You, the tenant of every unlived possibility. You, the keeper of the keys to rooms that haven't been built, yet. So rest now. The city's stories will wait. They always do. Because the house is still here. And somehow, against all odds, it still believes you'll return. Just don't forget to leave the light on. Someone, somewhere, is finding their way back too. Good night.